नमस्कार मूल्य जी। राजेश सचदेवा, आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही।
ऊपर है
हाँ
अब आगे।
हाँ जी
हाँ बिल्कुल
बहुत दिनों के बाद दर्शन में अच्छा लगा बहुत।
बिल्कुल सही।
तब ठीक है,
बस दुआ। चलो इसको ऐसे कर देते हैं।
जी सर।
अरे
तब हाँ already some are still yeah I see yes
ओके
now
ठीक। Good morning, our participants from abroad, and good afternoon, participants from India. On behalf of Center for Roma Studies and Cultural Relations, I am extremely happy to welcome you all to the face of Roma community with mainstream societies in the 20th and 21st century. Special welcome to our scholars, academics, and activists from abroad. And I'm really grateful to our ambassador, Dr. Gyaneshwar Muleji, who is the member of National Human Rights Commission of India, for accepting our invitation for an inaugural address today. As you are aware, this center has been active for almost 2 years and has undertaken a number of activities to better understanding about the life of Roma's community and their historical Indian connections. Our exercise is awareness about Roma community among Indian society, academics, and institutions. Papers, news reports have highlighted prejudices, discrimination, and persecution of the community of century in many parts of the world. During Second World War, the Nazis subjected Roma to internment, forced labor, and murder. In recent times, European Union has initiated efforts for Roma inclusion under EU framework by year 2011. However, our recent conferences, Roma continue to face challenges in the form of life sectors such as housing, education, healthcare, employment, and other social economic. Some scholars realize that the situation has worsened for Roma community during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. That is
videos of time
about challenges and problems faced by Roma community in the assimilation process in countries of their residence, as well as changes progress in their lifestyle in the 20th and 21st centuries. Today's presentation would help us to understand the of European Union countries Roma inclusion, and to provide indication of way forward for them. The center look forward
हाँ तो लेकिन वो चेक करते रहना पड़ेगा तुमको, लेकिन अब नहीं कर रहा।
cooperation between Roma and Indian scholars in areas of their mutual
माइक म्यूट
interest.
कर दो, माइक म्यूट कर दो जो बोल रहे हो तुमको।
I think we are hearing some sound, so I would appreciate if everybody closes, mute their sound so that properly. Now I would request Jamil introduce our participants for today's discussion. Jamil.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And we have today we have the 9 international scholars who are going to present the paper on the theme of interface of Roma communities with the mainstream societies in 20th and 21st century. And our first speaker is Professor Marcel Cotiare. He is a professor at INALCO, Paris City, Sorbonne, in the department, he is in the department of head of the section of Himalayan languages and South Asian languages. And his title for the presentation is Majority and Minority Interface and the case of the Romani dispersed nation, diaspora, and an introductory survey. And the second speaker we have Miss Liliana Kovacheva. She is from Bulgaria, and the title of her presentation is A Model for Romani Community Mobilization, Relations between Bulgarians and Roma Community in Bulgaria. And the third presenter we have Mr. George Bernal. He is the president of ICRA, that's the non-governmental organization that identify the cultural Romani of Argentina. And he's also a human rights activist. And the title of his presentation is The Rome in Argentina, Integration and Rejection. And another participant we have from Russia, she is a professor, Dr. Mariana Sesla-Vinskaya. She is a research scholar. And the title of her presentation is The Problem of the Positive Social Dynamic of Romani Societies, Case of the Post-Soviet and its European Countries. And another we have a very distinguished scholar, that's Mr. Orhan Galvez. He is the president of Euro-Asian Romani Academic Network, and he is from Netherlands. And the title of his presentation is Socialism and Capitalism. Socialism and Capitalism in relation with the Roma community in 20th and 21st century. And another presenter we have Mr. Marian Mandak. He is from an NGO based in Romania, that's a Romani Crest. And the presentation, the title of his presentation is The Main Challenges Faced by Roma from Romania. And another presenter we have Ms. Mozgan Zargar. She is from Iran and she is a cultural activist and writer. And the title of her presentation is Outlining the Economic Status of Romani People in Iran. And then again we have the scholar, the Professor Hristo Kochakov from University of Silesia, Katowice, Poland. And the title of his presentation is Assimilatory Policies Towards Roma in Communist Time, the Case of Bulgaria and Czechoslovakia. And we have another scholar from India, Dr. Punita Singh. And the title of her presentation is Love Thy Neighbor, Challenges in Applying the Golden Rule Across Mixed Communities. And we have today the four observers, the special guest from North Macedonia, and he is the president of International Romani Union, IRU, that's Mr. Zoran Dimov. And we have another from the same organization, Pandit Virendra Rishi. He is also the vice president of IRU, Indian Diaspora Segment. And we have another observer from Hungary, Mr. Laszlo Feov, and he is also the cultural activist and human rights champion. So, and we have another vice president of IRU, that's the International Roma Union, Dr. Vijender Sharma. So, these are the presenters and observers today we have, and sir, all of you are most welcome to this international conference. And we are very much interested in hearing and listening to your expert views and valuable remarks. And now I would like to call upon Rajesh Sachdeva sir to proceed the conference.
Oh, thank you, Jamil. Now I would request our President of Antarashtriya Sahyog Parishad, Ambassador Virendra Gupta, to give the welcome address. Ambassador Gupta, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Sachdeva. I'd like to greet all members who are participating in the conference. In particular, our good friends from the Roma community from different parts of the world, who have been no strangers to us. They have been attending our various events and conferences. Once again, Marcel Cotade and several others, very distinguished people in their own respective fields. I welcome you all. I would also like to join Rajesh in welcoming our guest of honor, Ambassador Mule, who has been very kind in having accepted our invitation. This afternoon's seminar is extremely important from our point of view. Firstly, Antarashtriya Sahyog Parishad has been attaching a lot of importance to expanding and making and keeping its connections with the Roma community. If you look at the entire spectrum of what is Roma community's connection with India, I think if you look at the firstly the emotional dimension, the kind of emotional attachment that the Roma community has with India, and many of us had the opportunity to see it firsthand when we, in 2018, after the conference, international conference, when we went to Kannauj, and many of our Roma delegates started filling up small boxes in their bags with the soil, with the earth from Kannauj, where the Roma community is believed to have originated from. It was a heart-rendering experience. Their linguistic connection, the kind of connection that exists between our language and the language which is in vogue, which is in use in the Roma community, the cultural practices, the traditions and rituals, so much of similarity. And in fact, we've done several events to highlight that connection. I think the most important is the genetic connection. The fact that they have originated from India for many years. In fact, people in Roma community believed that, but there was a sense of disbelief in India. There were some academics who would accept that, but I think the general acceptance was lacking. And I think genetic confirmation, genetic studies confirmation has really confirmed everything. So I think when you look at the entire spectrum of what is the dimension, it seems to me that, the kind of connection that in India we have with the Roma community is far less than what it should have been. There are 25 million people of the Roma community spread across the world. They have made many accomplishments, and there is so much that they have done, which makes us very proud, which makes us share their sense of pride. At the same time, we are also aggrieved at the kind of treatment which the Roma community has received in various countries. Now, it is well documented that historically the Roma community has suffered the worst kind of persecution, discrimination, all kinds of oppressive practices they had to endure. You saw that during the World War itself. And this persecution started from the medieval times. There are all kinds of horror stories and anecdotes and the government edicts which are there. I mean, which are there for everybody to see. And I think what we were very much interested in is that has the situation changed after the Second World War? Second World War, post Second World War, we regard generally as the modern era. And it's a matter of examination. In fact, in Antarashtriya Sahayog Parishad, we are very fortunate to have set up a Roma Study Center, which is, to me, it seems it is the first of its kind. I would really like more academic institutions and more NGOs in India to take the lead, similar lead, and establish centers, establish organizations, begin to devote greater attention to academic studies. So I would like to also welcome the Indian academics who are participating in this conference. I've always feel greatly encouraged to see, just a few of our Indian academics taking interest in the Roma. It is such an interesting area, and there is so much to study that we would really like more academics in India to begin to focus on Roma studies. And in fact, it is my hope that our Roma Study Center will generate the interest and create more opportunities for people to pursue. So as I was saying, after the Second World War, the question that we would like to study, the question that we would like to examine is how the Roma community all across the world in their respective countries, how well have they integrated in the social milieu of their respective countries? What is the kind of interface between them and the rest of the society? How well have they been accepted as part and parcel of the their national communities? And I think it is extremely important from the point of view of we are not reaching any value judgment, but we would like to study this. This is the matter which we would like to study, and in our interface, in our engagement with the Roma community, that is something that we would like to be informed. In fact, in India, there is a lot of interest, I would say. The fact that 25 million Roma community originated from India. So in a sense, they are part of our wider diaspora community. And if there is a sense of suffering, if there is a sense of discrimination in a section of our diaspora community, it grieves us. At the same time, it is a challenge to us as to how we in India, people in India, and the Indian government can help relieve that kind of situation. So I think from that standpoint, today's seminar is extremely important for us to understand better how the Roma community in different parts of the world, how well have they integrated. Thank you very much, Rajesh.
Very much, Ambassador Gupta, for your remarks and suggestions. Now I would request our guest of honor, Ambassador Dr. Gyaneshwar Muleji, to give his inaugural address.
Thank you, Rajesh, Ambassador Rajesh Sachdeva. Thank you so much. Ambassador Virendra Gupta, our friend and Secretary General, Shri Shyam Parandeji, other very distinguished people from all over the world. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever is convenient to you to accept. Please accept my greetings from India. This is a kind of a noon here. It's a great pleasure and privilege for me personally to be able to speak to all of you on this very important virtual webinar, Interface of Roma Community with Mainstream Society. I am not an expert, certainly, on the issue of Roma community, but I did have the privilege of attending the last conference that we had here in New Delhi in the Andhra Bhavan 2 years back, where I was able to present my views. Currently, being a member of the National Human Rights Commission, I feel much more aligned, associated, and much more related to the issues pertaining to the Roma community of the world. This is if the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is taken as a basis, if the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are taken as the basis of our development in future or present, then it makes sense that we think in a different way about the issues that are being dealt by us about the Roma community. Am I audible? I hope I am audible. Okay. And my
Audible,
video
sir.
too is on, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, you are audible,
Okay.
sir.
So, I personally feel that if you take the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as the basis of our discussion, then right to live, right to liberty, right to equality, and right to dignity is every human being's right on this planet Earth. And when you judge what has happened or what is being done about the Roma communities, irrespective of where they are in the 30 odd countries that they reside, and more than 15 million of them, 10 to 15 million of them, we need to take the issues and the human rights of these particular communities very, very seriously. Their number is in no way small, even though they have been persecuted in the past in so many different ways. In Second World War alone, it is believed that more than 200,000 of them were killed, during the Holocaust. We in India look at it from two perspectives. One is, yes, our External Affairs Minister in 2016 very clearly asserted that the Roma community are children of India. And there was also a decision and a recommendation at the end of 2016 conference that government of India should consider Roma as part of Indian diaspora. Now, I think that is our agenda in India, and because we do feel that whether it is linguistic, whether it is cultural, whether it is ethnically, whether it is based on the religious practices and language, the Roma people are our brothers and sisters. So I personally feel India has a very serious responsibility.
I think we have lost connection.
We lost him.
Or the appropriate to culturally to developed countries criteria. In the past atrocities, and many of them continue today. There has been enslavement that they have suffered. There has been racism that they have suffered from. Discrimination is an ongoing issue. Isolation of different kind is ongoing. Extermination happens even today. And there are other aggressive measures in terms of that affects their culture and lifestyle. There are at least, in my own understanding, there are at least 10 countries where the population of Roma is more than 3%. And there are 7 countries where the population is more than 7%. They are there in almost all continents of the world, and they are slowly awakening to their own rights their own place in society, their own place in the modern world. However, unless all the right thinking people in the world come together and to take their cause to improve their legal status, because they suffer on account of identity, on account of being minority. They also suffer on the social in the social dimension in terms of education, employment, housing. They have economic difficulties because they are generally not considered part of the labor market, business, or entrepreneurship, or industrial area. Culturally, their culture is subjected to kind of thereby they suffer a lot, not having their practices, not having their language being taught in the school. Politically, their participation is slowly increasing, but it's still not adequate enough for them to have their independent voice. And certainly, education and health are the areas that do require a lot of attention. I hope that today's discussions really focus on how we can build these partnerships. When I say that country like India, India as a country must take a larger ownership, I also believe that a large number of people-to-people partnerships will have to be built, particularly in the field of education, economic opportunities, as well as cultural exchange, including preservation of language, culture, and other social practices or spiritual practices that we have. So I do have a lot of expectations from this conference. I would like to quote Václav Havel when he became the president of Czech Republic. What he said that how we look at the issues of Roma community will determine the quality of our country and our democracy. I think how the world community deals or treats the Roma community will actually determine the quality of human rights that we have in our modern world. I thank you, particularly RSP, for giving me this opportunity to give my opening remarks at this conference, and I wish you all the success. Personally, I am fully committed to this cause of integrating, or I would say any way that we can ensure progress of the Roma communities in the 30 odd countries that they are residing. Thank you very much once again, and namaste and Jai Hind.
Oh, thank you very much, Ambassador Mule, for sharing your thoughts, giving a way forward, and suggesting things which we can do together with Roma scholars, Roma institutes, with Indian scholars and Indian organizations and institutes. I'm sure we look forward to suggestions which will emerge from this conference to take things forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'd like to move towards the academic session. Before we start the academic session, I would request all the participants and the presenters to kindly limit themselves to the time, because we have number of speakers which are around 10. And my request, humble request to everyone is that let's restrict it to 10 minutes each. And later we will have time for discussions and question answers after the academic session. So I hope you and look forward to your cooperation on that. And now I request our first presenter, Professor Marcel Cortihade, to give his presentation on the topic Majority-Minority Interface, the case of the Romani Dispersed Union Diaspora, and introductory survey. Professor Marcel, the floor is yours.
Seems he doesn't have internet connection.
No, he did not unmute his mic.
Professor Marcel? Professor Marcel, can you hear me? So if he is unable to hear us, so that maybe we'll move to the next speaker and come back to him later. The next speaker is Miss Liliana Koyacheva, and her topic is a model for Romani community mobilization, relations between Bulgarian and Roma community in Bulgaria. Miss Liliana, are you there?
She's not here.
She's not there. Okay. So next speaker is Mr. George Bernal. I think he's there. Yes, I can see him. And we'll start with him with his topic, the role in Argentina, integration and rejection.
Yes, I'm here. I would like to thank you, all of you, and I'm going to read my paper. Well, my paper is called The Rome in Argentina, Integration and Rejection. Growing up as a Rome has been a difficult task. The racism, hatred, violence, prejudices, and discrimination that we face in daily life in some of the countries of this beautiful planet where we live don't allow us in many cases to find a place for a good life that all human beings deserve. I grew up in Argentina, South America, facing discrimination and prejudices from others too, mainly at school because of the language and all the false ideas the non-Romani had developed about our people. My country and its inhabitants shared the same prejudices as their ancestors in Europe, who had conquered these lands where I live. And our elders, who came from Russia, Greece, or Serbia, who were already familiar with these, taught us that interaction with outsiders was not so easy and recommendable at all. And for that reason, we learned how to hide our origins and to seek invisibility, stating that we were of Greek or Italian descent and saying that our language was ancient Greek, etc., etc. Even though at the same time we were proud of what we were, Rome. We many times felt the fear of openly showing our identity, origin, and culture, mostly in dealings with institutions and public powers. In the early 1980s, I was encouraged by many people to continue working on our fairy tales, language, and later in politics and in seeking our destiny, something that I began strongly. Let me see, because I would like to continue. And openly in 1982, 1983, and even before this, timidly when I was a teenager who loved his own culture, but who was somehow afraid of the outsider's world. The arrival to the Americas. The arrival of the first Roma to the Americas was really similar to their original exodus from India and subsequent nomadism in Europe. These always were the consequence of racist harassment and systematic persecutions, which in some cases ended up with banishment orders to be carried out in the American lands. However, and only in accordance with the following authors, the first Roma who are known to have come to the so-called West Indies are four colonists who accompanied Christopher Columbus on the third voyage of discovery in 1498. After arriving at Guananani in 1492, the Genoese made several trips where he discovered different Caribbean islands until he reached the shore on what is now Venezuela. The protagonists of our small investigation that participated in this important historical milestone were Anton from Egypt, Macias from Egypt, Catherine from Egypt, and Maria from Egypt. Those were their names translated into English. By the turn of the 16th century, there were numerous cases of deportations of Roma, of the subgroup called Calon, from Portugal to the colonies in America. Spain tried similarly to get rid of its Roma population when forced assimilation was resisted. It happened most of the time. They were sent to Africa or to America. Well, I was speaking about other things later, but I'm going to read about the situation of the Romani people in Argentina. Argentina is a country which has been conquered and largely inhabited by people of European background, and which has several minorities living in its territories: Arabs, Jews, Armenians, Irish, Roma, etc., without mentioning the national minorities such as the descendants of the original inhabitants of the country. At 1% or less, there are no real figures about this. And the marginalized mestizos, half white, half Indian, who according to statistics, I mean Indians, Native Americans, who according to the statistics makes up approximately 10–12% of the entire population of the country, but whose very existence is often denied. The truth, however, is that this country has never had a real policy regarding the preservation and recognition of its minority languages and cultures until some years ago, although in the country minorities schools flourish everywhere, fighting against the lack of a real program by the government to keep their mother tongues and cultures alive: English, Armenian, German, Jewish, Japanese schools, etc. The resident Roma in Argentina are approximately 300,000 persons, and started to arrive to Argentina from 1880 onwards, mostly until the second decade of the 20th century. The exception are a group which came from Spain in the 60s, another from Romania in the 90s, some 300 people who eventually went back to Europe in the time of the Argentine economic crisis, and some families who have been coming from that time and until now from some neighboring countries, Colombia, Brazil, and Chile. Some of them have relatives here. The Argentina Roma belong to the following groups: Greek, Moldavian, and Russian Calderas. Me, myself, I'm from the Russian Calderas, although my family went first to Sweden, later to France, and later to Spain, and
Mr.
before.
Bernal, one more. Mr. Bernal, may excuse me
Yes.
1 more minute to wind up, please.
Yes, I wait for you. Yes, tell me.
No, I was just saying if you can finish it up in 1 minute, please.
If I can finish.
In 1 minute.
Okay. I just wanted to mention the groups here, which are Russian Galderas, Lowry families, and Chilean Horajane. Well, I would like to say that regarding the economy of the Romani people here, unfortunately, by fortune, we encounter a good country. But the problem that we have is with school and with the interaction with the institutions in the country. We have discrimination, not the kind of discrimination that we have in Europe. Here is not the same, but we have many problems. Mostly the women, because they wear the traditional Romani clothes until today, as in many countries in Europe. And because of the language, we also have some problems. But mostly the discrimination is at the institutional level in the country. Because of that, many of our children leave school at an early age. This is in the first 4 grades school, or 5, mostly for the girls than for the boys. But the problem is that I'm finishing now. Just a minute, please. We are facing with that kind of discrimination. So we are having some problems regarding education. But at the same time, we have some persons who reach the university and have some careers, and they are professionals, but they are not so many. Well, this is my paper was longer too, but well, I wanted to give a panorama about the situation in our country, and I would like to thank you for the invitation to this beautiful meeting and the possibility to know most of yours that I didn't know from before. I know some people here in the room, but not all of them. Well, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bernal, for sharing your views and also sharing your paper on the situation of Romas in Argentina. Now I would request Professor Marcel to make his presentation. Sir, floor is yours, sir.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. We can hear you, sir. Now we are not able to hear you. Hello.
No worries.
Professor Marcel, we can't hear you now.
I'm trying to unmute. Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear now. Please.
We can hear you now.
Yes, go ahead.
I was saying that
Now we can't hear you.
Again lost.
Professor Marcel, we can't hear you.
Has again muted his mic.
Oh, he disappeared. Yeah, again he's on the screen.
Professor Marcel, we can't hear you.
Maybe
There
host
seems to
can.
be some problem with the connection.
No, he has not unmuted his mic.
Professor Marcel, can you unmute your mic?
Maybe host can also do that.
No, that's host Chetan. Can you try?
Unmute.
It is done.
Yes, Professor Marshall. We can't hear you.
Ketan or somebody on host side can help him.
So I think if you, Professor Marshall, if you permit, then we move to the next person till we sort out the problem. Okay, so we'll move to the next speaker. That's Professor Dr. Mariana Siminova Selsevenaiska. Her topic is Problems of the Positive Social Dynamic of Romani Societies, Case of the Post-Soviet and East European Countries. So Dr. Mariana, the floor is yours. Dr. Mariana?
It seems she doesn't have.
I think I can see her in the list. But she has she is muted. Dr. Mariana?
She's trying to connect.
Okay.
Connected.
Say. Okay. Hello, colleagues. I'm sorry if I will have some problem with connection.
We can hear you. We can't see your photo, but we can hear you.
Okay. My topic is devoted. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay.
Yes, we are listening.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fine. Go ahead.
Can I continue?
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
Yes. Please sometimes do me some sign that you can hear me. Can I speak? Oh, I don't hear you.
Go on, please go on.
Okay.
Please
My
speak.
Mariana.
my topic is devoted to such two main forms of Roma social progress in macro societies as personal inclusion and group reintegration. It's based on our field work and communication with Roma in the countries of the former USSR and of Eastern Europe from the 1990s to the present. Case 1, individual and family inclusion. Roma positive social dynamic is mainly presented and studied as an inclusion in the macro societies. That supposes the positive social movement of separate persons or families. There are different consequences in this process for members of compact Romani settlements and for local Romani communities as well. Thus, a successful person or family might be excluded from their own traditional Romani society because of the offense against Romani tradition. For example, a Romani family has a successful business thanks to the good education of its young members, of its wide business ties. Romani traditions require that the members of the same territorial or kinship community share their financial success with other members. This sharing has real forms of financial support, but often this tradition may destroy family business, and the successful family might be forced to go away from their own community or weaken their traditional ties within it. So it starts losing its traditional values based on collectivist principles to the more individualistic ones. Different members of the same Romani society who become much more socially successful than other ones weaken the ties within the traditional society. These families are included in different sectors of state or private economies and the social life of the macro society, which often leads to their ethnic mimicry because of their fear, real or imaginary, of ethnic discrimination. Many well-educated Roma with a high social status try to hide their ethnic origin from surrounding non-Roma people. They don't speak Romani between themselves in the presence of their colleagues, patrons, or clients, and don't demonstrate any other signs of Romani culture. And they leave locations identified as Romani by the non-Roma. Often people work for a very long time beside Roma without finding out about their real ethnicity. It's typical for Roma working in such state institutions as police, scientific organizations, governmental services, hospital, etc. And often Roma can't hide their ethnicity because of the features of their appearance. Only scholars of Romani studies, artists, and NGO activists of Roma origin never hide their ethnicity because it's more likely raises their professional rating. At the same time, less successful Romani people continue earning money using traditional Romani ways and often living in traditional Romani locations where they continue using collectivist principles which help them to survive together. The departure from Romani societies and mimicry leading to the assimilation of successful families contribute to keeping the image of Roma as a socially unsuccessful and marginalized people. It's a very big problem of the representation of Roma in macro societies. Case 2, group positive social dynamic. The group social dynamic of Roma is mostly considered in its negative aspects, as their social marginalization, mass loss of the group occupational and business niches, etc. We can only rarely find out the type of positive social dynamic when the whole Romani group changes its occupation and social status to a higher one. Usually, it leads to changes in its cultural features, especially to the collective refusal of the everyday usage of ethnic dress, to a higher educational level and usage of the behavioral models of its surroundings. In the eyes of the non-Roma, this group obtains a higher social status. This universal social and cultural phenomenon has its own particularities in India, where it's called Sanskritization. We call this phenomenon a group reintegration because social changes leading to the higher social level affect all members of the same group with the preservation of its social borders. An example is presented by one group of Roma Calderaș. Calderaș are traditional craftsmen coppersmiths, one of the best known Romani community all over the world. They preserve very well important features of their Romani culture: strong ethnic ties, strict social norms, rules restricting women's behavior, early women marriage and women's traditional dress, and somewhere even their traditional occupation. Nyamtsuroni is the community of Bulgarian Kaldiraj of 500 or 600 people. They remained coppersmiths until the crash of the socialism in Bulgaria in the 1990s. At the same time, at the time of social and economic revolution, new business and market niches opened. So families of Nyamtsuroni used this opportunity to start building and renovation businesses. Some of them have organized small companies. Their wives and daughters, who carried heavy sacks with metal utensils and were barely literate until recent time, now finish financial colleges to manage businesses of their husbands and fathers. Less successful members of Nyamtsuroni started specializing in building professions and work now for their relatives or other companies. This new social level, everyday contact with clients, partners, employers, or hired workers from the surrounding population, required a new public image of Nyamtsuroni and especially of the women, which in many situations is connected with the hiding of their ethnic origin. 50 and 60-year-old women who wore full traditional costume 30 years ago now wear modern dresses and suits and trendy hairstyles, and 40-year-old women even wear pants, which is absolutely impossible among traditional Kaldiraj. These changes reached by Nyamtsuroni during the period of only one generation are colossal, taking into account that Roma Kaldiraj are considered as the least adaptive Romani groups. However, this progress was made by Nyamtsuroni themselves, without any external care or benefits given by the government. Another impressive example is presented by Macedonian Roma, who took advantage of the social changes of the same period. They achieved the proclamation of the Roma as one of the main ethnic minorities in Macedonia. Thanks to the obtained autonomy, they elected a Roma mayor in the biggest compact Romani settlement in Europe, Shuto Orizari, with tens of thousands of people and without any infrastructure. With their Romani mayor, they took only 2 years to transform it into a modern settlement. Our observations of different groups of Roma show that group positive social dynamic or their reintegration is closely related to the opportunities and prospects that the economies and social space provide. This explains why these changes are associated with the time of social revolutions, when new windows of opportunity open up. The answer to the question, what do Roma really need for their positive social changes, is autonomy. It's required by many Romani societies in different countries, especially in Eastern Europe, where there are big Romani compact settlements. Because Roma, as each other people, have their own responsibility for their communities and lives. Thank you very much.
Very much, Professor Mariana, for very interesting presentation. It was interesting to know how the Roma communities in some parts of Bulgaria and in Macedonia have moved up, and your views on that. Thank you very much for sharing this thought with us. Now,
Thank you very much.
check whether Professor Marcel is available, or should we move to next person? Professor Marcel?
Hello? Hello,
Yeah,
can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Please.
Oh, okay.
The floor
I
is
took
yours.
I took another computer.
Oh, thank you.
Last year, during the celebrations, we expressed the wish that at the turn of the second millennium of our life outside India as a diaspora, we will hopefully start a new era in our relationships with majority population in the countries where we are citizens and or residents. It could be the case indeed. A major prerequisite for this kind of rebirth is to build it on solid and reliable grounds in terms of concepts and methods, but also of real empowerment. Any majority-minority interface is by definition asymmetric, but this asymmetry should not be a cover story for inequality, injustice, and domination. We observe that it has been the case so far for the Roms, but also for most peoples with no compact territory. 10 of such peoples exist in Europe, and a conference was devoted to them at the Council of Europe in September 2003. Unfortunately, this concept fell very soon into oblivion because it did not suit the majority's ideologies in the member states. To evidence the tremendous injustice exerted on these 10 peoples with no compact territory living in Europe, let us remind that a genocide has been perpetrated upon 7 of them in the 12th century. Now, before I switch to the main course of my speech, I would like to suggest a new word for the notion of people with no compact territory. The formula distinct multi-state-based people was used in the past. We have on hand the words of nation, people, community, diaspora, ethnic group from Yugoslav vocabulary after Stalin's approach, minority, etc. Most are not appropriate. For example, minority in Europe. Even if we take the lowest estimate of 12 million, the Roms would be at the 8th place out of 35 nations in the 28 member states in Europe. So I suggest the Romani word Somdiv, which means archipelago in Romani. Each of these peoples is like a Somdiv, a word remaining Indian, the word Dvip Samuh, just the other way around, since Som is Samuh and Div is Dvip. So I would say there are 10 Somdivs in Europe, but the most numerous are the Roms, absolutely. There are several obstacles to progress, and the most pernicious of them are related to the fact that observations and decisions about the Roms and their majority-minority interface are left exclusively to people who are not involved and in addition are not realistically acquainted to Roman issues. From the back of their office, most of them are not even aware of their lack of information. Their mentions of Roman empowerment are but a pious anthem, with no practical impact. Their approach is strictly of outsiders, sometimes in good faith, but not always. I believe that our aim in this conference is to make visible the historical mechanisms which led to the present time situation, without accusing anybody, because the notion of sin or guilt are not scientific categories in humanities, especially history. We have to analyze and withdraw constructive conclusions for the future, not take pleasure in vain indignation and magic formula. I will focus my speech on the last 100 years, as it is the topic of the meeting, and anyway, the situation prior to the First World War can be summarized as follows, very quickly. Europeans were locked in their rigid vision of the world. They were not able to acquaint a new culture, so that their lack of open-mindedness led them to a false perceptions of the Roms, and they did not understand, due to the mentality of the time, the alternative culture conveyed by this new diaspora. Almost all scholars in the past concentrated on the misdeeds of a minority of Roms. It is in a very wild Europe anyway, much more delinquent and even dangerous as a whole than the Roms at that time. And they embedded their accusations into the fake cliché of nomadic way of life and lack of religion, while creating a fabricated wrong image of the Roms, a detrimental stereotype which is still prevailing and very active today. So, improvement in the perception of the Roms, not only by stakeholders, but also by laymen, out of whom stakeholders emerge anyway, is a key to changes and progress. Nevertheless, the venture is not easy, since at least two stages are requested. First, we need to interest the critical mass of people to Romani issues. But we can observe every day that it is very difficult. The disparaging feelings of the masses about the Roms, due to the heritage of slanders about them, prevent most citizens to feel involved in any search of justice in their favor. Even brilliant politicians, like the former French Prime Minister Lionel Jospin, expressed this view in a euphemism, saying Roms are not a priority for France. Accordingly, if 500,000 of French citizens are not a priority, is this a reason to let thrive injustice against them? How to become a priority? Terrorism is excluded because it was never a part of Romani culture. So education of the majority. But how can presumed wrongdoers take part in educating or even informing the self-satisfied majority? When I was appointed professor in Alco University, some people around me told with bitter irony, now Manouche will teach us school. Manouche is derogative for Rom in the slang of French police. Secondly, even if a number of people get involved in the search of truth and justice while fighting to replace slanders with realistic views among laymen, the question of capable, honest, and active Romani involvement is still pending. Mainly due to the wide and deep distrust of the Roms on the Roms' behalf, due to rampant corruption, financial but also political, prevailing in Romani matters. So the next step would be to interest a critical mass of Roms in getting rid of the overall cliches about this famous majority-minority interface. The main obstacle here is that active cooperation is needed. At least in my generation, many Roms got committed for this, but most remain ignored or even denigrated or mocked. The ones who achieved some recognition had to stick to the mainstream ideology. This is what I call political corruption, namely, to be forced to utter some statements about which you know they are erroneous, just to make sure you are not losing your job and advantages. The question of the majority-minority interface was a crucial topic of the Fourth Romani Congress in Warsaw 30 years ago. This Congress relied only on Romani forces, being in addition politically supported by the highest officials of UNESCO. In that Congress appeared the question of the interaction between majority and Romani minority. I should say Romani Samdiv. It was reported in an article published in Chandigarh in the following year by late Rishi. One of the main discussions during this Congress was devoted to the need to give up repeated complaints about the Roms' fate, and this is a typical attitude of majorities involved in favor of the unfortunate Roms, and replace this attitude by a brotherly hand of cooperation with majorities in dignity and Romani pen. One may summarize this U-turn with Rajko Djuri's words, newly elected president of the EU. Odrome Romengo na kelandi pruve gajengi, nashito oveli kengi emancipatia, bite ovelvi e averengi emancipatia. The Roms' route crosses the land of the Gage. There can be no emancipation of the ones without the emancipation of the others. This emancipation, the Romani contribution, spiritual contribution, is the liberation from xenophobic mindset, accumulation of ethnic slanders, acceptation of false debates aimed at covering primitive responses to ancestral figures, imprisonment in nationalism and territorial belonging, submission to destructive ideologies aimed at reinforcing the power of the happy few. One could quote a very poetical text sent by Romani Union, but I don't have time. I will share with you by mail. All this shows that the Romani people is an exemplary model of constructive integration, living as peers among peers, but keeping their heritage alive, provided they are not rejected, excluded, chased, literally hunted as wild beasts, hung, burned, gassed, and slaughtered. Mainly during the Nazi genocide, but also to a lesser extent in other contexts. Such treatment turns some Roms into marginalized social groups, and these are used by racists to stigmatize all the Romani subjects. Objectively speaking, to speak about the lack of integration of the Roms is a racist untruth and should be punished by law as such. However, the so-called freedom of speech or freedom of lies appears to be stronger than justice, at least for the Roms, because when exerted against most other minorities, such freedom is qualified hate speech and condemned by penal courts as well as public opinion. In this respect, we have to promote a realistic, but by no means angelic picture of the Roms as partners in European societies, and our studies about the minority-majority interface should tackle the various fields where interactions were constructive. Facts are the best weapons to combat the base statements of politically inspired researchers or racist activists, including crypto-racists. These fields are language. A lot has been done in this field, but we have to continue in various directions. Languages in contact, sociolinguistics, semiotics, etymology, statistics, etc. 2. Culture and contribution. The most scrutinized field is music, but here we are facing very sharp ideologies, namely conflicts between those who consider all Romani music and dance are an Indian heritage and others who deny any originality to Romani music and dance. We are trying to prepare a realistic research in this field, and it will be available at least in Romani language early next year. Other arts should not be neglected. In addition, they should be studied from inside and not imposed by outsiders who make a living of transferring to the Roms. 2 minutes. Some cliche taken from other sources, just like we prepared this book about Romani history, and I think it could be interesting for all of you to have it and use. Another important field is economy. I will not speak a lot because Mariana was brilliant in this field, and I just mentioned that the economical contribution by Roms to societies have been underrated, not to say overlooked, although this subject is of the utmost importance to combat the fake image of the lazy Rom prevailing all over Europe and America. The contribution in terms of family is also important, giving a model of loving family to a Europe where the basic values of a healthy family have been undermined by various ideological trends. Politics. This topic would deserve a world conference. We organized the first scientific conference devoted to this subject a few years ago at Inalco University under the title History of the Policy of the Roms, made by the Roms, vis-à-vis European society. It is meaningful that, at least in France, many young researchers devote their PhD to Romani policy. Many of them compare the Romani situation with colonial and post-colonial regimes. As Indira Gandhi emphasized in Chandigarh 40 years ago, India has a heavy burden of colonial remembrance. However, ethnology and tradition should not be forgotten. There is also here a vast corpus to be explored, including mutual influence, borrowing, revitalization. Also contribution and accomplishment, the promotion of Bare Roma, of great Roms of the history, and racismology, a scientific study about racist phenomena. A key phenomenon is how to include science itself into these domains. Since many Romani researchers are implicitly rejected from the family of peers. Just like the rest of the Romani people, Romani scholars are viewed as underage humans, and their works are not even mentioned in mainstream biography. All our colleagues who are speaking to today are hardly present in mainstream bibliographies. The only exception is when non-Romani scientific or political structures take on board puppet Romani researchers, objectively undereducated, even though they could have some degrees. This is kind of self-defense of the majority, used for the following reasons. First, these individuals confirm the cliché that Roms are undereducated, whereas Generals Gadget extend a brotherly hand to them because these Roma are not guilty, as if guilt were a scientific category. Now I'm coming to the end. The second point is that such individuals are not dangerous in terms of competition, and anyway they are aware of their inferiority as compared with those who manipulate them. C. They are also submissive and will agree with all kinds of compromising due to their fear of losing their job. Some of them are not even Roms, and that fear, as well as their lack of concern, is an even more important. D. They will never read further and research really, because they see no point in doing this. In addition, any criticism against them or their bosses is discarded immediately by arguments based on egalitarianism. This plague of confusing scientific position with individual opinion is very harmful for all domains of research, but much more in Romology. And my conclusion will be that this is the main reason why cooperation with India is so important for us. Namely, and mathematically or mechanically, because none of the 5 points mentioned above is relevant for India. India has no interest in confirming the cliché of undereducated Roms. B. India is
Professor
not
Marcel,
afraid. It is my conclusion.
Professor Marcel,
It is my conclusion. India is not afraid of any danger in competition created by Roms. India is not interested in circulating biased concepts about Roms. It is not in the interest of India that Romani researchers limit their knowledge. For the time being, India is not very much contaminating by this British and European non-ideology of egalitarianism and denial of intellectual elites. And this was my conclusion. Romani scholars can bring a lot to India, but India has to save an epistemological space devoted to correct, systematic, and realistic research on the majority-minority interface in view of making this currently asymmetric relation more and more symmetric, creating an environment of real academic research free of ideology, and only India is the appropriate location for this.
okay. Thank you very much, Professor Marcel,
You are welcome.
for your presentation. I think we are running short of time, so we'll just move to the next speaker. And may I request
Ambassador,
the next speaker is Mr.
Ambassador, can we request Mr. Orhan because he has a flight to catch? If he is in a
The next
position to
speaker
speak,
is
can you please?
the next speaker is Mr. Orhan Galius. May I, Mr. Orhan Galius, floor is yours. Mr. Orhan Galius, has he left?
Yes, he has already left. He sent a message.
Yeah, so I think then we'll move to the
Yeah,
next speaker.
he has,
He has
he
left
has
the meeting.
already said goodbye.
Okay. Then the next speaker is Mr. Marian Mandache. The topic is the main challenges faced by Roma from Romania. Mr. Marian?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I'll try to skim through the presentation faster to get some better results in terms of time. I'll be focusing a little bit first on more general issues, and then if I will have time, then I will get into the current situation a little bit. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and very warm salutation to all the participants today here. Te avem bahtale sau ore în romale. I will be a bit in the lines of uncovering some of the main challenges or racist stereotypes against us as a nation. And I use that because in Europe there are increasingly numbers of people, some of them pretending to be scientists, who claim that Roma are not really a nation, but rather a social group, that most of the problems that Roma face are social issues, and that we don't have a nation because of other reasons of not having a territory, but also considering us that we don't really have a culture, a language, common language, and so on. This is, I would say, a rather ridiculous statement. Not only that, but I think that Roma, in fact, do have one of the strongest identities, national identities in the world. Certainly one of the stronger tested identities. Like it was mentioned previously, and like all of us know, Roma have been facing pervasive discrimination all over the world, Europe in particular, but also in the Americas, also in Asia, and that discrimination was extremely widespread. Someone mentioned earlier the human rights situation, and I often used to argue that almost all of the human rights are being routinely and constantly violated against the Roma. So Roma human rights are being constantly, and almost all of them are being violated. Not just that, but we see that we have faced probably one of the worst treatments that humankind has been offering to any nation on the face of this earth, because we have been part of the slavery. So apart from this pervasive discrimination in southern and eastern Romania and the principalities, the Roma have been slaves from 1377 until to 1856, so that's almost 500 years, one of the longest periods of slavery in the entire world. And we have also been victims of the Holocaust. Professor Ian Hancock puts the number of victims, of Roma victims in the Holocaust, from 500,000 up to 1.5 million. Certainly, Roma were one of the main targets of the Nazi Holocaust. And throughout the history, Marcel Curtiade mentioned earlier, he made some reference also to the hunting of Roma, just like beasts, like animals, which would happen in Europe, medieval Europe, in certain German principalities and in many other parts as well. So we see that the Rom were persecuted extensively. We were also exterminated in many ways, and whilst other people also faced very harsh ordeals, the Roma have faced them all. So I would say that the Roma faced also slavery. We also faced Holocaust, and we also faced this form of common form of apartheid in certain parts of Europe. So we faced everything that is worst in the face of this earth. And here is the catch: we survived. And not only did we survive, but we were able to survive keeping our traditions, keeping our languages for the most part. Not everywhere, not all the times, but we were able to survive with a strong culture and a strong language and a strong national identity. And this is why I publicly say, I also wrote it in some previous articles available on the internet publicly, that in my opinion, the Roma have one of the strongest national identities on the face of this earth. So from this point of view, I think that yes, we can stand as equals among equals, as a nation among nations, as a people amongst people, with our heads up. The other issue that people do say about Roma is that Roma do not like to work. And that's again a major stereotype, because I'm now using mainly the example from Romania, but I'm quite confident that that is the case pretty much everywhere else. In Romania, we have a lot of Roma who are collecting scrap iron, metal, and plastic bottles. And in order to do that, one family, man and woman, they have to walk because they don't have cars usually, and walk for many kilometers. And then if they reach a point where they are collecting the iron, sometimes they even have to dig it out from the ground for many hours, then put tens of kilograms or even hundreds of kilograms on their back or on a small skate and pull that for many kilometers, and then they sell it for €5 or €10 or $10 or $1. It depends on what they get. And they do that every single day, including weekends. So in my opinion, that's something that a person who doesn't like to work is never going to do it, because this is extremely hard work. It's extremely regular work, so it takes a lot of time. So that happens everywhere. So that shows clearly that Roma do work, and these kind of people who do this kind of works are usually the ones that are the most pointed with the finger and the most rejected and the most discriminated. And guess what? They're doing probably one of the best jobs that there are in the for the society, because they're cleaning up the society from plastic, from old scrap, and so on. So they should be thanked for their role in the society, because they're model citizens to the ones that throw the garbage and they're not. That is not just the case there. If we look at who swipe the streets, if we look who works in the constructions when they're building the manual construction of the roads, and also if we look at other jobs, it is not always the lowest jobs. If we look, for example, of medium jobs like cutting hair, making nails, many of those girls are Roma girls. And it's again day in, day out. In Romania, there are some small businesses like selling flowers, which are dominated by the Roma, which again take 10, 15, 20 hours a day to keep that shop running. In my country, and I think in your countries as well, there are certain Roma who are professors, who are lawyers, etc., etc. In most situations, because of pervasive racism, many of these people, they do not work. They do not recognize in their workplace that they are Roma. And our colleague from Russia was very good at explaining how this happens. What I wanted to point out was that in many European societies, if Roma stopped working, like they pretend, they say that the Roma don't work, those society would go into financial and economic collapse and destruction, because the contribution of the Roma is so great that it's an integral and strong and substantial part of the economics of that society. There will be more other examples, but I will stop from giving that, and I will go into the current issues, because it is not true that the Roma don't go to school either. That's a different story. But my current situation, current comments to the present situation look at the COVID case crisis, and in Romania, I will just list the problems. Do I have 1 more minute?
Please.
Been having these problems. Mute your. Okay, so we've been having this problem in Romania with the COVID crisis, and there were a lot of very racist statements in the press by politicians, by journalists, um, mainly accusing Roma of a couple of things. One of them was that Roma were bringing the disease from Western Europe, which was stupid in many ways, because the number of the Roma coming back was not significant in terms of the general population. There were a lot of Romanians who were coming back from Western Europe. Also, another problem was that Roma were being accused of not respecting the conditions for isolation and staying at home, which again was silly, because it wasn't only the Roma who were doing that. There were also the Romanians and also others. But they were pointing at the Roma, and there was a media lynching of Roma in that period. And also the police had a lot of abuse actions. Police was beating people up. We went, Romani Chris, into the field and we documented these cases. We made movies. Some of them are available on our Facebook page and on YouTube. And we showed, and there were a lot of police abuse, and we filed criminal complaints against that. So this crisis we anticipated to be the third crisis after the communism. In Romania, we had the initial crisis in the 1990s with the interethnic conflicts, where the village population would go into the Roma community, burn them down, collective violence, and sometimes even beat and kill people. The second crisis was the deportation of the Roma from Western Europe in 2007 to 2010 from Italy and France with Sarkozy and Berlusconi, which was again extremely illegal. It broke the European legislation on freedom of movement. And now this is the third crisis that we are facing with the COVID, where in many parts of Europe, Roma people were, first of all, accused of spreading the disease. Second of all, they were beaten up by the police. And third, they were left without any form of economic support to feed themselves. That was a huge problem in Romania and in other parts. We will publish soon a report on that, and we will make it available publicly. I will stop here because of time constraints, and I will thank you once again for your kind understanding.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marian, for an interesting presentation about situation of Roma community in Romania. And now we'll move to the next speaker. He is Miss Moigan Jarkar. Title of her presentation is Outlining the Economic Status of Romani People in Bhutan. So, Ms. Jarkar,
May I request? May I request Professor Marshall and Dr. Sham Singh Shashi to mute their mics, please? Their mics are unmuted. Professor Marshall and Dr. Sham Singh Shashi, kindly mute your mics.
हो तो जाएगा मुश्किल भी कराएगा
Dr. Shashi. Miss Jarkar, are you there?
हेलो
Yeah, Miss Moigan Jarkar.
वो लिखा हुआ आता है मेरे पार्टिसिपेंट लिस्ट में एक ही है वो टेक्निकल इशू की वजह से दो दिखा रहा है वो एक सेकंड में देखते
May I request Ms. Jarkar to make her presentation? I think we are not receiving any response from Ms. Jarkar. Ms.
He has to
Jarkar?
unmute his mic, please.
Ms. Jarkar, can you unmute your mic?
Unmuted now.
Yes, we can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to participate in this form of scientific conversation, to which I hope that I offer my little contribution. I'm Mojgan Zargar, Iranian subject living in Tehran. I belong to the ethnic minority of Iranian Roma that's named Zargar, and I hold my master degree on international relations, and my bachelor was in political science. My research area is that of international relations and minority issues, and especially those concerning the Roma worldwide. I have contributed in relevant publications and attended a number of conferences over the last decade on the above subject. I want to speak today about Roma community in Iran. I am behalf of my brother Javad Zargar here. He was the person that invited for this conference, but he couldn't attend this conference. Now I'm here. I want to very shortly speak about Roma situation and Roma community in Iran. The Iranian Roma community calling themselves Zargar, meaning goldsmith in Farsi. Native tongue is that European Roma diaspora. The Romani and their dialect, named Zargari, is that of the so-called Balkan group Rumelia. It is very interesting that Roma people of European origin would be found living so far to the east. The nearest Romani communities who speak the same dialect are found in Thrace in northwestern Greece. More than 2,000 kilometers away from Iran is in a very different linguistic environment, Greek and Turkish. So apparently the Zargar are migrants whose origins are in a Balkan origin. Despite the lack of reliable historical records, it is considered that two waves of Roma people from Balkans come to Iran. The first from Greek-speaking Anatolia region during the Safavi dynasty with the assistance of Shah Ismail, early 16th century, that played a critical role by supporting the dynasty, and second from Ottoman held Rumelia, Balkan Peninsula. As three brothers goldsmiths were brought as hostage during the reign of Nadir Shah, 1736 until 1747, and given pasture lands and rewards for their skills. The number of Zargar living in Tehran are difficult to determine with precision since no official records are available. I'm aware of different figures and several oppositions, so my estimation is for about 400 persons. The Zargar family live mainly the Tehran and other some cities near the Tehran and a big province that named Qazvin. Until the early 1980s, they were named moving smiths and herdsmen, tending many sheep and goats. Since then, the Zagars were offered the land and their summer and winter settlements, and they settled in their summer on. Today, they are mainly farmers, and among them, we have other also jobs and other people that among them we have very good musicians in Iran that they are very popular in the region, such as allow me to say my father Nusratullah Zargar, and he is very famous singer. The community members clearly consider themselves to be a distinct ethnic group, calling themselves Roma or Zargar, and non-Zargar are called Gaje, and Gor is a person not Romani by birth, who has married one of them and has been adopted into the community. In fact, most of them bear the family name Zargar, but this family name can be also found among members of the ethnic community in Iran. Furthermore, there are internal divisions among the Zargar into different tribes. In general, the social status of Roma people in Iran is very different than that in most countries in the world. There is no state neglect for Roma community in Iran, no high rates of child labor or abuse, low school attendance, police discrimination, and drug trafficking are found there. Since Roma people in Iran were given the lands of their settlement as mentioned above, not even the most serious issues regarding the Roma people in other countries. The housing problem existing in Iran. Roma people in Iran, unlike what's happening in most other countries, don't live in tents or properties that do not belong to them, making them subject to evacuation. They live in houses, and in general, they participate in of aspect of the social, political, and economic life, political attention, entrepreneurship, academic persons of them. It was a very short essay about the in Iran. I'm sorry for my English. I don't know how I will able to tell my essay, and I will not take more time. If any question there is, I will answer. Thank you very much for your attention. I really hope that this conference will become a podium for a productive exchange of ideas and information.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jalgar, for your presentation, giving us the status of Roma community in Iran. It was interesting, and question and answers we will have after all the presentations. So now the next presentation, I request, now next presentation is by Professor Risto Fuchiko, and the topic is assimilatory policies towards Roma in communist time, the case of Bulgaria and Czechoslovakia. Professor Risto, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I actually prepared the PowerPoint presentation and I will try to show it to you. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see that. Yes.
So, as you can see, the title of my presentation is Assimilatory Policies Towards Roma in Communist Time, and I'm going to speak about two particular countries. This is Bulgaria and Slovakia. And why exactly these two countries? Because they have some similarities. First of all, both countries were parts of bigger empires. Bulgaria was part of the Ottoman Empire, and Czechoslovakia was in the past part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And after the Second World War, actually 95% of the Roma population in Czechoslovakia was killed in the concentration camps. And actually these were the Czech Roma. And the Slovak Roma moved to Czech Republic in order to find jobs there. And then nowadays, actually, the Roma in Czech Republic are Roma from Slovakia. And in Bulgaria, the Roma were not sent to the Bulgarian government saved the Roma, and both countries were allies of Germany and Hitler in the Second World War. But you can see they had different policies towards Roma during the Second World War. Actually, in Czech Republic, the biggest concentration camp, which until recently was in the place where the concentration camp was, there was a pig farm, was in the town of Lety. So one very big part of the Roma from Czech Republic were killed in the concentration camp of Lety. So after the Second World War, there were some policies towards Roma, and of course being communist countries and East European countries, everything was under the umbrella of Soviet Union. And one of the first recommendations which came to East European countries in 1956 from the Soviet Union was to stop the nomadism among the gypsies. In that time, this was the term which was used. Of course, some of the countries followed this recommendation, but there were other countries which did not follow, for example, Romania and Poland and Hungary. But Bulgaria and Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, they followed the recommendation, and the nomadic life for Roma was forbidden. What were the consequences from this act for the Roma communities? Actually, the Roma couldn't practice anymore their traditional professions, and they were forced to work professions which are not typical or even culturally inappropriate for Roma culture. Work in the factories, in kolkhozes, and especially Roma women were forced to work professions sometimes with non-Roma men, with Gaje men, and this was absolutely unacceptable and inappropriate for the Roma communities, but still they had to do it. In this time, in this period, the assimilation of Roma communities was open policy. So in Bulgaria, the politicians didn't use officially the term assimilation, but in Czechoslovakia, the term was officially used and openly used. Very often, Czechoslovakian politicians were speaking about the assimilation of Roma, assimilation of Tsigani. So this process, speaking openly or not openly, actually existed in both countries. There were actions towards the assimilation of Roma, and I'm going to speak a little bit about those policies towards the assimilation. Yeah. What's wrong now? One of the actions which the governments took was the sterilization of Roma women. In Czechoslovakia, there was no special law for sterilization of Roma women. The law was actually against the sterilization of disabled people. However, in the practice, this was quite often. Roma women were sterilized without their knowledge and without their agreement. In Bulgaria, there was no policy of sterilization of Roma women, but a policy of stimulation of reduction of the birth. After the third child, the government didn't pay money for the fourth, fifth child, or they were paying very, very low, the money which they were receiving for the fourth or fifth child. Segregation, especially the segregation of the schools, in Czechoslovakia, it's documented that in 1920, actually, the segregation of the schools started. The Roma children were put in special classes or in special schools separated from Czech and Slovak and Hungarian children, because the parents of the Czech, Slovak, and Hungarian children didn't want their children to be in the same classes. In Bulgaria, after the Second World War, the government developed and built schools for Roma children in the Roma settlements, and very often also Roma children were sent to special schools, schools for mentally retarded children, if the children don't speak the official language of the country in a good way. In Czech Republic and in Slovakia, because Czechoslovakia in the past was one country, but nowadays these are two separate countries, as we know. Even today, still the segregated schools and special schools exist, and one very big part of the Roma children are sent to special schools based on psychological tests in the official language. And if the child is not good in Czech language or Slovak language, then he is considered to be mentally retarded and sent to special schools. So, language, negative attitude towards language. In Czech Republic, although that there were people, scientists interested in Romani, for example, Milena Hubšmanová, professor from the Charles University, still the attitude towards the Romani language was negative. Romani language was forbidden to be used in school or in media, and there were very little research on Romani. This was more possible in Czech Republic, but absolutely impossible in Bulgaria. And in Bulgaria, after the 70s, the use of the Romani language in schools or in public places, it was absolutely forbidden. And another assimilatory policy was the change of the names and the identity. In Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, there was no change of the names, but in Bulgaria, the government changed several times after the Second World War the names of the Muslim Roma. And in both countries, there was a very strong work towards the change of Roma identity. Actually, the expectations from the Roma were that they will become Czechs or Slovaks or Bulgarians. Well, this is actually my presentation, and on the end, I would like to say just one word, that those assimilatory policies continue even today after the democratic changes, especially in Bulgaria and in Czech Republic, in the field of education and language use, unfortunately. Thank you very much.
Very much, Professor Risto, for this presentation about the assimilation policies in Czech and Bulgaria. So now we move to the next presenter. Now I request Dr. Punita Singh. Her title is Love Thy Neighbor, Challenges in Applying the Golden Rule Across Mixed Communities.
Yes. How do I start? How do I share my content?
My knowledge on this subject is limited. Maybe Professor Risto can explain to you. He just did it.
Okay.
Professor Risto, can you?
I see an option.
Okay.
Did you see this? There is the possibility for sharing.
Yeah, do you see it now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. All right, so love thy neighbor. Is similar ones like do unto others as you would have others do unto you. So these were coming to me when I was thinking about interface of Roma with majority communities. And because in these phrases you have the solution. We've all talked about all the problems that there are in living with mixed communities. But what's the solution? And if we dig into these phrases, you realize that if we actually practice this, it would solve a lot of the challenges that we have with integration and so on. Where's my presentation? Can you still see it?
No, we don't see now. Yeah,
Okay.
now it is there.
All right. So this is a golden rule. It's been called the golden rule, and if we could really follow it, it would be wonderful. There are, of course, many equivalent rules. It's not just the Bible. It's like almost every religion has such a rule. So in this picture, you can see most of the world's religions with something similar about treating others well, about treating others the way you would like to be treated. And again, so this is where I'm seeking inspiration from. And the way I've structured this presentation is drawing from this inspiration, then leading into the aspiration. What are the plans and strategies that we could implement for helping the lives of Roma that are facing this sort of challenge? Then looking at some data, some of the logistics, the statistics, supplementing that with some anecdotes and ground realities that I have personally witnessed in interactions and travels with Romani people. And then there's a theory that I have about factors that separate and unite. That theory actually came from the field of sound, but it seems quite applicable even in a context like this. So I'll share a little bit of that. And then end with is there still scope for hope? What can we achieve maybe in our lifetimes? So that's the way we'll proceed. Now, I think most of you are familiar with the fact that the European Union around 2010-11 came up with the national Roma integration strategies. And the reason for that was that there was acknowledgement, there was awareness that the Roma are Europe's biggest minority. I mean, these conservative estimates of 10 to 12 million, I'm sure they're actually much higher. And it's a vote bank. And so, of course, it became a very important issue. It was center stage in 2010-11 that something must be done, that it is not acceptable in the European Union in the modern era to have people who are living in poverty and who are suffering in discrimination and so many inhuman conditions. So there was this appeal by the European Union to get every member state, all the EU member states were asked to produce a concrete plan leading up to this year, actually up to 2020. So like a decade of a plan to improve the situation of marginalized Roma, and with a special focus on education, employment, housing, and healthcare. So these years, why am I bringing all this up? I mean, I'm Indian, I live in India. But during these years, I was actually very involved in the European movement. So I attended a lot of meetings of the Open Society Institute. I also attended some of the European Parliament meetings. And so I was very familiar with what was going on with these strategies and very happy about it, that at least every country is being forced to do this. Now, I was checking yesterday about what is the latest report on this. 2020 was supposed to be the marked year of goal achievement. And it was interesting to find this image in one of the reports where now a fifth category has been attached. So not only do you have education, employment, healthcare, and housing, but anti-discrimination has also been acknowledged and put up front as one of the goals, one of the things to work on in the European Union. Now, sadly, 2020 has not turned out as any of us expected. And also in the middle, there were other things that happened. The war in Syria, other trouble spots that led to a mass migration into Europe and even beyond. And so there was this latter-day influx of migrants. And the Roma issue, in my mind, or in my view, was put on the back burner. And so all of those trajectories of hope that we were on were sort of paused. And well, that's quite sad, but let's see if we can reignite those. Now, moving on to some of the data, there was a big study carried out by the UNDP and the United Nations Development Program and the World Bank and the European Commission, where they interviewed a lot of Roma and non-Roma households living in close proximity in Central and Southeastern Europe. So that's very relevant to our topic today about this interface between the minority and the majority community. So the four dimensions that have been a part of the strategies, education, employment, housing, and healthcare, if you look at them, I mean, I know this text is very small and you may not be able to read it, but basically on every dimension, the data, the survey showed huge discrepancies. Okay. That rarely above 50% was the enrollment rate in primary school for Roma. and hardly 15% of young adult Roma had completed secondary education or vocational education. The segregation we've already heard about in terms of school systems. Hristos talked about it, other people have talked about it. On the employment front, less than 1/3 of the Roma surveyed in that particular study had paid employment. And the others, about 67%, were employed in unskilled or semi-skilled jobs. So even this we've heard about from Marianne Mandace and from other people about the sort of, it's not that Roma shirk work. It's not that there's no work ethic, but there's just the opportunity is missing. And so Roma involvement in the informal sector is more excessive than it is in the formal sector compared to non-Roma. You don't see non-Roma picking strawberries and plants and harvesting and doing manual hard labor. A lot of that work is left to the Roma to do. So this, all of the arguments people make about Roma that they don't work, they're lazy, those are really quite bogus because, like Marianne said, they're some of the most hardworking people you'll find. On the housing front, this is particularly distressing because demolitions are going on even till today. Just yesterday, someone forwarded me a video of houses being demolished in Bulgaria, Roma houses, and people are screaming around them because bulldozers have arrived with no warning. And these little shanties, these little shacks that many of the Romani call their home are just being dismantled in front of their eyes. There are old people screaming, and it's just heartbreaking. And according to this particular survey, about 45% of the Roma lived in households that lacked basic amenities, whether that would be an indoor kitchen or an indoor toilet or even a bath or even electricity. And I can certainly supplement this anecdotally, having seen this myself, where there are so many homes that are never completed. In the bitterly cold European winters, there are windows without glass panes, doors with just planks boarded up, and so on. So the housing condition is also quite abysmal. Healthcare, where we've heard a lot about what's happening with the COVID discrimination right now, these days. But in general, even in this particular survey, which is almost 9 years old now, it was found that more than 35 to 54 reported health problems in their daily activities. And most Roma were not covered by any kind of medical insurance. They couldn't afford prescription drugs compared to the majority population. And many of the Roma children under the age of 14 were never vaccinated compared to the percent of children from non-Roma households. So on all of those 4 dimensions, you find this. You find these huge discrepancies. There are also discrepancies in age, in longevity. The Roma age is supposed to be approximately 10 years shorter than the non-Roma average age in Europe. So if you're living with these constant inequities on a daily basis, how are you going to feel? Where are you going to find your source of pride from? How are you going to live each day with any kind of joy or hope? So these are very real issues. And so I'm glad that we brought it up in this particular conference. I was going to move on to anecdotes, but I've already shared a few. But some other things I wanted to bring up. The very first one I've written here, which is the passing or the hiding identity phenomenon. And Mariana talked about this, about Roma people who no longer speak the Romani language. And if they are of a fair skin, they'll move out of Romani neighborhoods and they'll pretend to be non-Roma. Now, this is something I have witnessed firsthand, where I was once invited by a very rich Romani tycoon in Romania. And I thought that he wanted to help his community, which he did want to help. But the most unnerving thing was that he himself had not revealed his identity as a Rom. And the reason was very simple for him. He said that I won't get any business if I am considered Rom. He was also running for the parliament. And so all of his business and political aspirations would have been thwarted if everyone knew that he was in fact from this reviled community of Roma. So this is a very, very strange and unnerving phenomenon. And of course, those Roma who are swarthy, the people who wear their identity on their skins or in their dress or in their language, well, they can't get away with this kind of passing phenomenon. But it brings up an ethical question, like why should you need to do that at all? Why can't we have pride in who we are? And I think this is where we really need solidarity and to really get Romani groups together and lead this pride movement about embracing your own ethnic identity, being proud of it, and being upfront about it. Some of the other little anecdotes that I went to Cluj, which is another village in Romania, which is very famous for its musicians. Some of the most famous violinists live in that town, and they've been immortalized in movies. There are other villages like that, like Prajin, which are famous for their brass bands. And yet you visit these places where the musicians are superstars, and yet they're living without electricity. There's one water pump in the entire village, and you just walk a few steps to the neighboring village, and you see that they have everything. They have water, they have electricity, they have houses with roofs, windows with glass panes, doors that close. So what's gone wrong? Why aren't they loving their neighbors? Why is there such basic inhuman sort of treatment right across the street? And in Cluj, it was so heartbreaking because one of the people I met who was in that movie Lachodrom, which is famous, full of Romani musicians, and there he was literally begging to play something for us so that he could get some tips. And then when people say that, oh, the Roma are dirty and so on, how do you expect hygiene when there's no sewage system? How do you expect hygiene and washing hands and all of this, particularly in COVID times, when you don't have access to water? So all of this is very, very real. And then all of these denunciations that people say, some of my Bulgarian friends, so-called friends, saying things like, oh, well, they keep horses in their houses, in their flats. We gave them flats and they brought horses into them. Or in Serbia, they light fires in their flats. It's a hazard. Some Slovenian people saying that they overuse our welfare system. And then, of course, in once really funny incident in France, where there I am sitting, me with my dark skin and my swarthy Indian complexion and my Indian accent. And I'm being told by a French person, hey, be careful when you go into town, there are gypsies around. And I'm thinking like, really? Are you looking at me? I might be one too. I am one. So there are all these cliches that you find when you run into the majority community, and they sometimes feel free to share some of these prejudices and these cliches with you. Of course, this thing about leaving garbage everywhere in the Burgenlands in Austria, I've been told that as well. The thief thing, that's really omnipresent. I mean, that's probably the first thing you hear from people. But I was so happy to hear at one gathering where there was some of my German friends, and they had lots of valuable things in their bags, cameras, computers, all sorts of stuff. And they were leaving it to go and meet somebody. And I said, hey, maybe you should take this with you because there's quite a crowd here. And they said, we're not scared. There's only gypsies here. My stuff is totally safe. So that was really gratifying, because there is actually a huge sense of morality and ethic within the Romani community, even though the outsiders may not think so. Another sort of positive comment one has heard is about weddings and music and dance, of course, that you cannot have a wedding without getting a Roma band to get the music going, to get the dancing going, and so on. So they are almost like we have in India as well, like certain communities are invited to weddings because without them, the wedding is not considered complete. It's auspicious to have them at weddings. So there are some positive comments like that one has heard, but by proportion, the comments have mostly been of a prejudiced nature. So how does one combat all this? Like I was saying, around 2013, when I was involved in a lot of those meetings, the trajectory for hope was very strong. And then came all this, the migrant issue from Syria and other places, now a pandemic, economic catastrophe, and what do we do now? So this is really quite a situation we are in. So I don't obviously have any total answers to anything, but I wanted to share a theory that I have about the Gestalt principles that apply for bringing things together and breaking things apart, for segregation and for integration. Now, these are things that have been studied in the field of sensory perception, in vision, in audition, in hearing, and so on, which was my first area of study. And I find parallels in the Romani world as well, in the sociology of life. And so I'm sharing some of that, which is that basically groups are formed around something common, something similar, a common cause, some feature that is similar. And groups are divided, people are divided across things that are different. So it's as basic as that. And so what is different and what is similar? Are some of these things extrinsic, which means that maybe they're changeable, they lie outside of you? And some of these things are intrinsic, which means that they lie inside of you and they may not be changeable. So here's a list of some things that we could look at.
I don't know.
Yeah? In terms of intrinsic, things like skin color. I mean, you can't really change it unless you're Michael Jackson. And your race, you cannot really change that, your facial features. Okay. So these are intrinsic features. There might be things like religion, cultural practices, lifestyle that you would not want to change because they're so intrinsic to you. But I put them in italics because they could be changeable, like Mariana said earlier. Then on the extrinsic side, there are things like education. You could certainly get educated and lift yourself out of that situation where you're considered illiterate. You could get wealthy. You could accumulate money and be considered wealthy and acquire status. You could maybe get elected to some position and have a status that gives you power. You could move from a ghetto address to a neighborhood, a plush neighborhood. So addresses could also change some of that perception. Your attire, your dress. Again, we heard about this from Mariana, about how people are dressed and how that could be a factor distinguishing for and so some people have given up their traditional dress just in order to assimilate and adapt to the majority culture. So is that something one wants to do? We know that it works. We know that people do it. And then, of course, if there's a common goal, if there is a common cause, if there is a common enemy, then people tend to group together around that. And one would have hoped that something like a COVID pandemic would have been a common cause and would bring people together. But sadly, it hasn't served that purpose. But these are some factors to consider because some of them are things that we actually might want to work on to bridge the gaps. For example, education is one such. Even in India, I have seen people rise up classes just on the basis of education. And so there might be things like that one can do. There might be things like language and accent. Now, you don't really want to change your language. You want to embrace your mother tongue. But maybe you could become proficient also in the language around you, in the majority language, so that you're able to communicate. And communication is a huge thing. So when people talk to you and they talk like you, they tend to also like you. They tend to want to be with you when they feel that you are like them, that they understand you. They understand what you're saying. They understand where you're coming from. They feel that you are one of them. So these are some factors that one could consider. Now, where am I getting most of my hope from right now is from the youth, the Roma youth. Because according to one survey, a recent one from just 2019, I think, the Roma population is young. 35%, 36% are under the age of 15, compared to 16% in the EU overall. And young Roma are very aspirational. They want better lives. Many young Roma tech savvy. Many of them have smartphones, computers. They're plugged into the internet. Many young Roma are aware of the human rights issues. And there is a phrase that they use a lot in the US called woke. You know, a woke generation, which means that young people have woken up, that they are aware. They are no longer sleeping and dormant like their elders might have been. So this woke generation is what is giving me the hope for the future. And I've just recently, on the 2nd of August, which was the Holocaust Memorial Day, so I attended some of the virtual events hosted by Ternipe, which is the youth movement of the Roma. And every year they organize events to commemorate the Holocaust. And one of the lines, which I think even Indians will understand, is Dik Ina Bistar. Look and don't forget. And so that gives me hope that the young people are interested in their own history. They're interested in the future. They want a better present. And they're working on it. Opre Roma.
Okay. Dr. Punita, have you finished?
Yes.
Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. So we now understand that about the status of National Roma Integration 2011, how far it has been successful. But you have ended with a hope. So let's hope that things move to a better world. So now we have finished with the academic session, and now we have one request earlier received from Mr. Virender Rishi. If he is there, he said that he would like to say something. Mr. Rishi?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, please.
Okay. Right. Did Mr. Zoran speak to you earlier? Can you hear me now?
You want Joran to speak first?
No, I like him to speak first.
Okay, so is Mr. Joran there? Would you like to say something?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Oh, would you like to say something?
No, but Veranda here, speak and then maybe we enter next time, and I'm here. No problem. You go to agenda.
No, agenda is over now, so we are with the observers. So you are the first observer. So would you like to say something?
Of course, and maybe I give my support first, Veranda Rishi, some speak, and maybe to next time speak. No problem for me.
No, please go ahead. You can speak, then Mr. Rishi will speak.
Okay. Rishi, you like first and I speak. I don't understand what you like.
No, you speak first, Mr. Zoran.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you because I'm here and very, very support for me and give to here to conference. I glad to look at everybody. And I'm sorry, but my English is not very, very good. But I try to speak and maybe to Christo help me something and all people who is very support for me. And now and I like tell to Namaste, India. Teven Baktale, Teven Saste Veste, Kamari Romani Chip. Hello, everybody who is here and listen to first time. And because nobody, I'm first time to conference to India. And my more time I speak and I first one go to India and New Delhi and look at to here city and look at people and the conference 2001 I think 2002 maybe and who is presentations to International Union President to Emil Chuka here together to Christo go me and the more delegations. And now, how President of International Roman Union very support for us communications and India because in the but history 1,000 years ago and very very support for us because in the India and the mother and the Roma people. What will I tell you, everybody? Thank you very much because in the here to very good people who is very support to give to Roma a question and the Roma history. I give to very support to here to academic, doctor, and historic men, how Christo, how Marcel Curtiade, Nadezhda, Punita, and the Dr. Shumra, and all people, young Hancock, here to Georgia Sarau, and the more people who is give support and only to life and prepare something to history to Roma. New generations who is coming, I very happy, I very big man because and here to only professor, doctor who is speak and the next generations look at something what to doing to Roma people. And the generations who is coming must think and must speak. Thank you very much. Here's doctor academic who is help us and identity to give to Roma and the language. One people and the more in passport and the one only people who is passport, who is a nationality and who speak, I'm Rom, I'm Sinti Rom, I'm Kaldarash, I'm Lovar. Every Rom who speak to here, Chengene and Kalo and Als, identity and the only culture Roma and the very support who is give to culture, traditions, language, and the only who is very support how to prepare him to give to next generations what know but Roma people. And my declarations, who is the 2nd August, and sent to more government and the more European Commissions and the United Nations and the more people to look at what now in the International Roman Union prepare to more strategy document and the more document who is very support for us next generations which must to fight him to identity to Roma. Punita and Veranda and Sharma and only Dr. Sharma and the lady Sharma and Nidia and the only who is and the India people who is come to Iru. I'm very happy because and the now to Iru and the very good and only to continent come to and the 5 continent to International Roman Union to membership. I believe I'm here help to only to doctor, academic, and the more delegate, our president, give to support to him. I know but how. I know but how to prepare to and then more marketing to here to language speak, school and the museum and the more something how to speak, understand to more people to language Roma. Standardizations to Roma language. I tell to more time to only to academic doctor. No problem. Problem to must speak to Roma and the must language to Roma. Maybe to difference speak everybody to Roma, but Rome and must speak to Romanes must don't forget to next generations who is coming. My people to Macedonia who is I living and here to 1991 and prepare to first academic class and the university and the Kirill Method. And here to very support political party who is Faik Abdi, who is Congress to 1971 and the London first deputy to Roma, give support the language to Roma. You know, but everybody, because I'm media man, because I'm the first Roma TV stations who is opening. 1992, and the very support first time how to speak to my journalist and my speaker, how to speak to Romanes. Standardizations, no problem, but speak to normal and more people understand. And the 25 years, my TV stations go to satellite and the more. I mean, who is like to presentations, no but Roma and the culture. Yes, the Roma, but no Roma people look at what and Roma history, what Roma to language, what Roma to traditions, what Roma to living, how to living, what to doing, what the sterilizations to problem to Roma and the discriminations. And the program who is the European Union and ALS prepared to anti-Tsiganism, anti-Semitism, and the tester, new program. And then nothing do it. Nothing. Roma stay only with places. And now must change. Please, my brother, my sister, help me. Give me something idea. Together. Together must fighting. Together must do something. India, my country, my mother country, must help us, must give to us support, must give to and something to diaspora India. Me, my brother, you here, diaspora me, because in the Roma 1,000 years and who is going to India, I'm Chinder. Everybody Chinder to India must give to diaspora India and the Roma and the help and the marketing and big program. Please help us. I tell to Romanes, Nak, Mui, Kana, Yakha, and the India language. Know something simulations how to like to my brother Als and the Israel, who is like to speak something to new metaphor and Roma come to Israel. No. My theory, my brother Christo, my brother Marcel, Nadezhda, Curtiade, and the only professor, Rajko Đurić, tell us more informations. Give us the very document with India children. And the must thing to India, how to help to here. I don't forget that because in the Roma king music, prima donna, very big woman, who is now in the sedate, Esma Recepova, who is go to Indira Gandhi, and speak to him and tell to him, because in the Roma and the Chinder India. And the mass political look at actions more here to my brother, sister, mass politic give to document in the here India must prove it to Roma and the India children. And the diaspora marketing must India children to Roma people. In the end, 50 years and the Roma Congress 1971 go to next years. International Roman Union together.
Excuse me, Mr.
Yes,
Mr. Jan, yeah, please.
On
please.
1 minute and finish. Okay. I like invite everybody here. Come together, my brother, my sister. Come together the 15 year who is in the International Roman Union existed. Very big jubilee. Come together and prepare something very good academic to time, academic to movie, academic to presentations. Who is us? Who is Roma? Who is what like Roma? Come on, everybody here who is my sister, my brother, prepare something. I am my heart opening, my head opening, my soul, my opening together to jump. Thank you very much, everybody who is listening to me. I'm Zoran Dimov. I am official president of International Roman Union. No something like to change. Together must change. Help me, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joran Dimmo. So now we'll move to the next person and Mr. Rishi, but make it very short. Mr. Rishi, not more than 5 minutes, please. Time is short.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me and inviting International Roma Union, Mr. Dimeo, who is the president of the Worldwide Roma Union. Okay. My name is Virendra Rishi. I'm president of Gypsy Council UK and vice president of IRU and of Indian diaspora. Following my father's, the late Dr. W. Rishi, I'm president and director of Institute of Romani Studies in Chandigarh. My father dedicated Roma House and Museum to Nehru during the centenary celebrations in Chandigarh in India. The Roma, so-called gypsies of Europe, Russia, Central and Middle Asia, the Americas, are mainly the descendants of Rajputs, Jats, and North India and Punjab. And the comprising states of Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Union Territory of Delhi, and adjacent parts of Rajasthan and Jammu and Kashmir. Discrimination and prejudice in Europe is resulting in terrible suffering the Roma people. Despite all the problems, Roma have sought to move forward and achieve breakthrough. Roma nation is moving. And now to the final one, I have made it my because I have to cut down my speech. I'm just looking at that. Okay. We have to tell the world that the Nazis camps never to forget and never forgive Hitler, Germany, and Gajo. Racism against Roma is even today. It is not known how many Roma died in the atrocities, but we estimate more than 1 million. And all I can say is that I have a Roma museum in Chandigarh, which is looked after by my relations, Dr. Sharma and Mrs. Sharma. And I have a lot of books on display there. And my father wrote many books about Roma, multilingual Romani dictionary, Roma, the Punjabi immigrants in Europe, the Romani Punjabi English dictionary, Gandmola to Sumer, India and Russian linguist cultural affinity. Learn Romani language is a 20 lessons which are still available in a Roma house in Chandigarh. All I can say is that I'm very grateful to all the people who gave presentation today, and thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Virendra Rishi. And I think now we have come to the end of the academic session. And now we open the floor for questions and discussions. If anybody wants to say something or ask anything, you're most welcome. The floor is open.
Please, I like something.
Yeah, Mr. Dimo, but let's be very short.
Yes.
Please.
Yes. Please, people who is in India. Please, my people who is living Asia. You must something give us very supportive history. sent us something what happened to people Roma and the mass prepared strategy history to Roma. I know, but very support for us. 18 August, I prepared a movie, Sky, Road, and View. Like to present to video, only to look at. But now, I ask everybody how to prepare to new strategy to Roma children, because must prepared strategy to history, language, and traditions. Must India give us support, give us aid, and here to academic, give, and the International Roman Union, I like to open and like to speak to founder, and the must prepare together very strong document. Please, everybody, give idea, come and job together. Cristo here, Marcel, Nadezhda, George, and Michael he is living. But come on, who like something? Ask, tell me how together prepare something. What I'm president here, like give me what I try to go to European and United Nations, come to prepare something to very good strategy. I'm here, I help. Please tell me who like something prepared. Thank you.
Your suggestion, and if anybody wishes to react,
Sachdevaji, can I say something?
please.
Yeah.
Please,
You see,
Dr. Shashibala.
yeah. I want to talk to Mr. Zoran Daimov that we have been talking a lot for a long time about contribution of Roma to steel industry in Europe. So there has to be a research project that I want to undertake. I want cooperation from different countries of Roma community. What they have to do is look at the history on one side of their migration to that particular country, and on the other hand, development of steel industry in that country. And what I feel, and what Professor Lukesh Chandra has been saying for years and years, that Roma had contributed immensely to the steel industry of Europe. If we can bring out that research, that will give a lot of respect to the Roma.
Thank you very much, Shashi Balaji. Anybody wants to react to this?
Yes, I like to.
Please. Yeah. Mr. Rishi, we can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear
We
you.
can't hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear
yes.
you.
Okay. Shashi Balaji, if you write to President Zoran, he will support you and will support you all the way, not only in Europe, in America and in Argentina, Brazil, because Mr. Aryu is throughout the world, and I'm sure you'll have good response from Aryu.
Thank
I have
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from any member?
One more comment from me. Yeah, Punita was talking about the health conditions and non-vaccination of Roma children. There is a lobby that works against vaccination because of its bad effects. And they say that the vaccinations are under research and the bad impact of vaccination is not allowed to be researched because the lobby is very strong, especially in USA. So sometimes as a person, I think we are against vaccination, but there are many people who are against vaccination. So I just wanted to know if there are some good points, good results of non-vaccination of Roma children. Maybe they are not suffering from the bad impact of the vaccination. Is there any research about it? I
I'm
wanted
not
to ask
aware of
Punita about
that
it.
research.
Yeah, yeah, Punita.
Yeah, but it's a good point. One can follow up.
Because you have first-hand knowledge about Roma life.
Yeah, it's a good point to follow up on.
Maybe you can talk to people there when you go.
Yeah. So Narayan Kumar, you wanted to ask something? Anyone else? हाँ प्लीज नारायण कुमार बोलिए हाँ सुन रहे हैं
I want to ask a question from Mr. Virendra Rishi. That where the Roma house exists in Chandigarh and how we can get the books for Roma in 40 days or Punjabi English dictionary. We have a plan from our Roma center, ARSP, to make a dictionary. So could you help in this project?
Yes, Mr. Rishi.
Yes, I like to. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I like one more thing. I didn't get chance to speak about Indian diaspora. This is my mission. Get the Indian Roma people as non-resident Indians, and have approached High Commissioners. I've written to leaders of India as well, but I received no reply. But this time I'm sure through the offices I will get a full support for getting these Roma people as non-resident Indians who left India nearly 1100. The first non-resident Indians who left India.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll do send us input. Maybe you can respond to Mr. Narayan Kumar's question.
I would like to say something.
Mr. George, you want to say something?
Yes.
Please.
No, well, I was thinking that this is something remarkable because we are living in this continent, the American continent. We've been living for 130, 140 years, and we still preserve the language, the Romani language, the Romani culture, Romani traditions. I couldn't find in any of the groups living here people who don't know all the traditions, the language, or our rules and everything. This is something really amazing, and I think that we have to be all together and we have to fight for the future all together, the Americas, Europe, and all the continents. We have to fight for that, and we have to be united. This is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. Any comment, any reaction to this suggestion? Okay, since we have no more, yeah, please.
May something tell? And Jorge, very good, my brother Vijay. And I like everybody. And the September, October, I go to Internet TV, television. My PTR is 25 years. And here to Iru TV station. And prepare to education program. Because now and I'm 13 episodes from alphabet. It's 100 language to Roma, speak Romane. And prepare to more education program who is like by everybody who is like to prepare to program who is India, America, Latino, Europa, who is how to speak to Romane.
Okay.
It's now and the burnout and the Cristo, the more people like how to together and prepare to education program, history program together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So now I think we have reached the time. So now I'll request Mr. Gopal, Professor Gopal Arora, to sum up the meeting. Professor Gopal Arora.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sachdeva. It has really been a very engrossing session, and I compliment all the distinguished panelists for making us better aware of the hardships and the difficulties being faced. Though we are right now in the midst of a pandemic, and this is the third international conference which this center has organized in less than 3 months. So that's one of the silver lining, because on digital platforms we are able to connect with the people. You have to keep in mind that in India earlier it took almost 3 decades to organize the first 3 international conferences. In today's conference, we could hear, you see, the views and concerns from experts across the globe. We had, you see, Mr. Jorge from Argentina, Professor Marcel from France. Then we had Marianne, Miss Zargar, Professor Hristo, Dr. Punita Singh, very important presentation. And then we had, you see, observers, Mr. Zoran Dirov, who is very passionate about connecting with India, and Mr. Virender Rishi, whose father has done, you know, a commendable work. Now, I'll be very brief since we have actually overstepped on its time. Now, this center is the first institutional arrangement, you see, which has actually been partly funded by Indian Council for Cultural Relations, which is an autonomous organization getting the grant from the government of India. So we are engaged in sensitizing here also in India, you know, about the concerns of Roma, about the status of Roma. Dr. Punita Singh has mentioned about the efforts of European Union in the field of education, employment, health care, housing, and then more late, you know, about the anti-discrimination. Now, what we have heard from our experts here is that while the schemes are there, the proposals are there, but the outcomes somehow have not been that effective, and that gap between the schemes and the outcomes remains. So I think as an actionable point, what we need to do is we have to really study what are the factors that actually are responsible for that big gap, and then how we can bridge that gap. Because if EU is actually working out, you know, and rolling out schemes and making out proposals to better the condition of Roma community, then why it has not been done? In my own opinion, when I went to Slovenia, I saw that, you know, the situation in the northeast part and the southeast part. Now, my experience was that there can be two, three, broad, issues why this gap is there. One is that sometimes, the Roma community itself may not be aware about all the schemes that are available. This can be one of the reasons. The other can be the bureaucratic apathy, that the machinery, the government machinery, which actually, works to implement those schemes, now they may not be that proactive to reach out the community so that the benefits do not reach out to them. In that context, I think that organizations which are like self-help groups or the non-governmental organizations, they can play an important role. Like ARSP is an NGO, and then it is now in association with the with the ministry or with an autonomous body, is doing its part. So I think you need to activate and self-help groups which can actually work with those departments to actually alleviate the problems of the community. The second thing which came to my mind is that we need more research based on figures, facts and figures. Like in today's discourse also, the figures were not really coming, like what happened in 2019 or 18, what is the status, what is the dropout ratio in the school, what is the housing situation in terms of that. So I think on that we need more research, and in that extent I have to tell you that ARSP will be willing to support the projects which are aimed at these kind of activities where we can have some hard facts and figures about these conditions. In fact, ICCR also offers scholarships, and their officials have also said us that if Roma students they want to come, they will be willing to provide them scholarships. So please make use of these facilities which the government is willing to offer you. Finally, I would like to say that we have to concentrate on the youth. There were good comments about that youth being very well very proficient in music. I think they are in sports also. The Roma youth is good in music, they are good in sports. So let us build up on the strong points of that. So youth should be our focus. They can be an agent of change for the community. In conclusion, I will say that yes, the situation is a cause of concern. The situation is more bad in some areas, and I will say less bad in some of the areas. So let us also identify some of the bright spots, or if they are not the best, they are not the good, they may be less bad. So let us also identify those areas or those schemes or those countries where which have actually taken some steps which have given some positive results. So that kind of positivity in that also may be helpful, so that other areas also emulate that. On our part, the center will carry on with our programs of engaging with the experts, whether they are academics or social activists across the globe, and we will carry on with our activities. We welcome all our suggestions and your participation. So this is a center to help our Roma brothers and sisters. We will welcome you with open arms. Do write to us, and whatever is in our hands, whatever best we can do, we'll always be willing to help you. Thank you very much.
Very much, Professor Gopal Arora, for very correctly summing up the whole thing, and also giving suggestions and for way forward. So we have to really look at suggestions and recommendations from Roma brothers and sisters. And as you rightly said, the center would be ready to take it with the relevant authorities in India. Now I take the opportunity to thank all the international participants as well as the Indian participants. My special thanks to all the academics, activists, and speakers who made very interesting and educative presentations, which, as Mr. Professor Arora was saying, has really helped us to know the situation as it exists now and as it was in historical sense. So thank you very much, and we will keep on this exercise. And next thing which Professor Arora just mentioned has given a thought that we will like to work on the next webinar, possibly on education and how to work a joint or share our experiences. Because in India also, we had this problem of motivating the children and encouraging the parents to go to school in some parts of India. So we will be also working on one cultural interaction on Facebook or on webinar. So we will keep you posted, but thank you very much. Namaste and enjoy your.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Nice
Bye
of
bye.
you.
Bye bye. Namaste.
Thank you. Ciao, Purita. Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.